You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast.
I'm Kevin Davis. Thanks so much for joining the show. And as in the past 2 months, I'm joined by my mother, and we're going to talk about the liturgical year in the month of March for the liturgical year, looking at the saints of the month and discussing a little bit in depth a few of the bigger saints and a few of the big feasts coming up. And there are some big ones in March and some ones that are very personal to our family and hopefully also to many others out there. And before I get started with my mom, I wanted to mention that I was talking to Rafi, and Rafi's been on the show a couple times, and he was saying that he and I had both planned a quote unquote tough week to go into Lent or a tough Lent. And he told me today that he's actually a little embarrassed and humbled because he's been reading the lives of the saints and kind of decided that our quote unquote tough week is pretty much a very life of luxury compared to the saints. So we cannot recommend enough reading the lives of the saints and spending time getting to know them, as is very much recommended by the church, because it does really put things into perspective and let us know kind of what our priorities should be. So that being said, Mom, thank you for joining the show.
Hi, Kevin.
And so I guess we'll just jump into it. I know we got quite a few saints to cover, and so I guess the best place to start is at the beginning.
Right. Okay, well, and one of the first things you have to think about when you're talking about March saints is that these are the saints that almost always, I think they maybe always fall in Lent. These are your Lent saints, but they're also the ones that I think many of us that follow the liturgical year and have for many years, these are the spring saints. These are the saints of hope. Spring is coming. When you see St. Patrick coming up, you're thinking, oh, spring. But starting on March 1st is the saint that's particularly special to our family because he is our patronal saint. He is our ancestral patron saint, I guess I should say, because our last name is Davis. He is our name literally comes from King St. David of Wales. We're of Welsh extraction, at least partly. And so King St. David is March 1st, and he is the St. Patrick of the Welsh, though more of us know about St. Patrick probably in general, especially in America, than they do about King St. David. He lived to be just about 100 years old, from the year 489 AD to 589, and he was he's called a king, but he was more specifically a chieftain at this, early stage in history. And he's called the St. Patrick of the Welsh, again, as I say, because he was so instrumental in the growth of the faith throughout Wales, and of course where he came from, which was Ceredigion, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, which is the part of Wales that he started up in, which is near Pembrokeshire, which is the western side of Wales. There's a lot of legend about King St. David. He was apparently born literally on a cliffside. His mother's name was Saint Non, N-O-N. She was a nun, apparently. There's real murky stories about his birth, and his parentage is really kind of murky. There are some stories that he was actually born in violence, if you understand, and was born on a cliffside. And his mother, Saint Non, left her handprint in a rock, which can still be seen on the cliffside apparently today. This is obviously legend. And after this rock, with a lightning struck the rock after King St. David was born, and half of that rock is in St. David's Cathedral in Pembrokeshire, and the other half is the foundation of St. Non's chapel, which is on that cliffside today. Is an ancient chapel that you can go see, which I am dying someday to go see. But King St. David was, he ended up being an archbishop. He suppressed the Pelagian heresy. You hear very much about the big saints, but you don't know what the big, cause of their time was. There was the big heresy in his time was the Pelagian heresy, which in a nutshell taught that there was no original sin, or there was no effect of original sin on mankind, and that mankind was perfect without divine grace, or could make himself perfect without divine grace. So it kind of was contrary to baptism and the need of baptism. And he suppressed the Pelagian heresy. I think he pretty much wiped it out. You know what his famous miracle is. You know what his famous miracle is, right?
I don't.
Oh, you should. I'm ashamed of you.
I should, but I don't.
Okay, so he was preaching at a synod in, what was the name of the town? Has something to do with Dewey, if I remember. It's a long Welsh name. He was preaching at a town where there was a synod, and there was a very large number of people. This is outdoors, and the people at the back of the crowd couldn't hear him. So somebody from the back's like, "We can't hear you, we can't hear you." And then underneath his feet, the hill came up literally underneath his feet, so that he was up above the people and could be seen and heard. And to this day, that hill is there. There's a village around this hill, and that is what's famous, for being the hill of St. David. The miraculous hill of St. David, which is another thing that I'm dying to go see someday. Speaking of, you were talking about being tough during Lent. Well, St. David was known as the water drinker. In his day, that was his kind of title, is David the water drinker, because he only drank water, which, if you know about that time, was a dangerous thing to do. And he was a vegetarian. He only ate herbs and vegetables. He was never ate meat. He was very much, and that's all the time. That's not just during Lent. He was very much a very, very pious ascetic almost. One of the interesting things, and I thought this was fascinating, and I don't think there may have been a phrase for it back in the day, but I've seen it referred to a couple times as pilgrimage points, like points as in a game. Different pilgrimages were worth more than other pilgrimages. All right. So seriously. So there literally was and I should have actually written out the way it was written in old English phraseology. But what it comes down to is that, all right, so 2 trips to St. David's Cathedral in Pembrokeshire was worth, during the medieval times, was worth 1 trip to Rome. Okay.
Okay.
3 trips to St. David's was worth 1 trip to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is the top of the heap. That was the big one. Rome was number 2, and St. David's came down beneath those 3. So it was actually, in its day, a huge pilgrimage site. But I just thought that was kind of funny. We're comparing points on our pilgrimages.
Yeah.
But
I guess if you're going to be competitive about something, that's something good to be competitive about. Maybe, I guess. I mean, or is it? I'm not sure it is. I guess if it's a godly competition, I suppose.
Right. Well, Father said a couple of weeks ago, now don't be bragging about what you're offering up for Lent. It's like,
that is true.
Darn it.
Yeah.
But the last words of St. David, by the way, and it's really interesting because there's several saints actually during March. Well, you see them all the time, and they go all the way back to the 5th century with this message that we think belongs to St. Teresa of the Little Flower of, the mid to late 1800s. But this goes all the way back to the 6th century, early 6th century. St. David's last words are, "Be joyful, keep the faith, do the little things that you have heard and seen me do." And so it's an actual Welsh phrase, which I would not even try to pronounce.
Right.
That just says, "Do the little things," which is exactly the message of St. Teresa of the Little Flower. So, I mean, that's not a new message, but that goes all the way back to King St. David. An interesting thing, you'll love this one. Every Dewy Sunday, every March 1st, there's a St. David's Hall in Cardiff, Wales, where 1,000-member male choir comes together to sing in honor of King St. David's feast day. And would you love to see it and hear that? I would just think, I kept thinking I need to pull that up online just to hear it and play a clip, but I never did end up doing it.
Well,
but,
I mean, I've always wanted to go to Wales because it is kind of our ancestral home, and it's not that far away from me now. And so I'll definitely have to remember that to go one of these days on the 1st of March, and maybe around this time, and visit the places of King or of St. David.
Oh yeah, well, and go hear those 1,000-member
right.
choir. Oh my goodness, that would be amazing. But yeah, so King St. David. But I also have to add that I don't think it was the neatest thing to me to find out. I don't know, halfway through, we've married almost 34 years, halfway through there somewhere, it hit me that we have our own surname saint. King Saint David is our family saint, which to me is the coolest thing in the world. And I think a lot of people don't know that they probably have a surname saint too. And I think that I just love it. So like there are a lot of them. It's very easy to find out. Like if your last name is Johnson, they pick a St. John, whatever, you just pick one. If you don't know particularly where your name goes back to, you could pick a St. John and that could be your family saint, which is, you can't have too many patrons, right?
Right.
So, but there's a lot of names too that aren't first name, last name. You know what I mean? But you could take a name like Smith, which means a metal worker. Then the patron saint of metal workers is Saint Eligius. So if your name is Smith, you could take Saint Eligius as your family patron saint. If your name is Weaver, Saint Maurice is the patron saint of weavers. If your last name is Carpenter, you could get Saint Joseph. It's just a neat little thing that it was the coolest thing to me in the world when I figured that out. But yeah, so anyway, something to think about. Do you also have a last name patron saint? But okay, so moving along, because there's a whole bunch of saints. I'll try to go fast. Saint Kunagunda, which I just like saying, is on March 3rd. Mm-hmm. She's on March 3rd. And here's the interesting thing. Her name comes from the German, apparently, and it means clan of war. Her name, which it sounds like it should mean. It sounds like a strong, strong German name. She is a saint from Luxembourg. She's called Saint Kunagunda of Luxembourg. And she is one of the patron saints of Lithuania. We have two saints in a row that are Lithuanian saints. And our dear Bishop Pivaronis, is a Lithuanian. We're having a big, you remember, the Saint feast is on Thursday in Omaha this year. But she was one of the saints of Lithuania too. Saint Kunagunda was. She was from, she was like the late 900s, kind of the turn of a millennia there. She is one of her famous miracles, or the famous miracle that I read about was that she had been, somebody was trying to blacken her name with the king. And he was a Holy Roman Emperor, Henry II, and accused her of adultery. And she, of course, denied it because she was a saint. And in order to prove her innocence, she walked on red hot plowshares. The things that stick up, the pointy things, on a plow. She walked on red hot plowshares without injury and without even blinking, to prove her innocence. And, God permitted that to be done so that she could prove her innocence. When her husband died, the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry, died in 1024. She was for 1 year the regent of the Holy Roman Empire for a year, when that was taken over, I think, by one of their sons. And then she joined a Benedictine convent and died eventually in the convent, about 20 years later, 15 years later. But that's St. Kunagunda. And right next to her, of course, is St. Casmir, who's March 4th. What you might not know about St. Casmir is that, or you might, having gone to Omaha, having gone to Mater Dei, is that he was the author of the song Daily, Daily, Sing to Mary. And I think almost every Catholic school child knows Daily, Daily, Sing to Mary, right?
Yeah. I don't think I knew that was attributed to him, though.
Right, it is. Well, and here's the thing. The more you start really studying the saints, the more you say, well, this person says that he translated it, and this person says that he wrote it. One way or another, he's somehow wrapped up in that song. So singing it on his feast day is particularly appropriate, I think. Right. And he was one that he died at only 25 years of age of tuberculosis. One of the miracle that's most known about him is that after his death, they were at war with somebody. There was called the Siege of Polotsk. I don't know how to pronounce it. He appeared at the head of the Lithuanian army and led them across a river that, apparently was deemed to have been uncrossable. But he came back and led them to a place where they could cross the river and they could rescue the beleaguered city of Polotsk from the enemies. So, and he was, of course, known for his piety and charity to the poor. but only 25 years old when he died.
Wow.
So very. Then we have, of course, March 7th, St. Thomas Aquinas. What can you not say to praise St. Thomas Aquinas? St. Thomas was in the 13th century. He was one of 33 doctors. He's called the angelic doctor for his great purity. He's known for his purity. What people may not know, and a lot of this, won't go through the whole stories. I mean, most of us, I'm preaching to the choir here, know the general stories of a lot of these saints. But some things that you might not know about St. Thomas Aquinas is that he had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So he was one of 6 kids. And he was afraid of storms. When he was a small child, he was taking a nap with his baby sister, and lightning struck the room and killed his baby sister.
Ooh.
And he was so terrified through his life of lightning storms, of thunderstorms, that he always carried a relic of St. Agnes for protection, which I thought was interesting, St. Agnes, but maybe his sister's name was St. Agnes. I couldn't find any reason for St. Agnes, but he was only sort of like the Blessed Mother. When you think about the Blessed Mother being given away to the temple when she was barely a toddler, 4 or 5 years old, so was St. Thomas. St. Thomas was literally given to the Abbey of Monte Cassino when he was only 5 years old. But then you wonder later on, his family had a fit about him joining the Dominicans. And it's really because being at Monte Cassino and having this idea that he could someday be the big honcho at Monte Cassino, it was a snobbery thing. And the Dominicans were a new order at this time, and they were kind of itinerant beggars. So the family, they wanted him to be an important person at Monte Cassino. They didn't want him to be a lowly Dominican, but little did they know. The title dumb ox that we usually hear him referred to, I think everybody knows he's the quote dumb ox, was largely because I think he was a big man and not a fast moving fellow. Probably my guess is a phlegmatic. But he was extremely quick of mind, so much so that it is known that he dictated to several secretaries at a time because he could think faster than only 1 or 2 could write.
And I've heard that story too, that he could dictate in multiple languages. I don't know if that's true, but that's a version of that I've heard, that he could do it about different subjects at the same time in different languages.
Oh, can you imagine? Oh, yeah, and I believe it. Yeah, but he was amazing. And there's another thing that I read, and I haven't read this everywhere, and a lot of these are conjecture, legend. You may take with a grain of salt. It's thought that his mother Theodora, his escape from the tower when they were holding him captive, and he escaped. There's thought that his mother Theodora actually orchestrated his escape, because she knew that he was so stubborn that he was never going to do what they wanted him to do and go back to Monte Cassino, that in order to save them their loss of face, that she just allowed him to escape on his own so they wouldn't have to bend and let him join the Dominicans anyways. But I just thought that was kind of funny. I don't know if it's true or not.
I think he's an interesting one, because I think if you really look at the trajectory of Catholicism or the way that the Catholic Church ran things philosophically, at least, I mean, the church itself has obviously not changed, but a lot of the way that it's been run, I think it's really been changed almost more than anyone else in the last 1,000 years by St. Thomas Aquinas. I think he set an entire different way of thinking about God and of thinking about how to come to God. And I think from that, the effects are still, I think, felt today. And then obviously they were kind of changed and kind of downtrodden during the Renaissance and whatnot. But I think that when you really learn the lives of the saints, I think he's probably the most influential non-pope, at least, in the last 1,000 years, I think. Oh, I think
so. I mean, for Christ to have said of him, "Thou hast written well of me."
Right.
You don't get a better, recommendation than that. And I think you're right. I think that the Summa is the bedrock of doctrine.
Right.
If you really don't understand something, go to the Summa, and it is so explained beyond. I mean, and that was his strength, was that he could take something and take it down to the nitty gritty to explain it.
Right.
He was a wonderful teacher, and that is what the Summa is teaching us. You know what? Something I did not know, that he established a university. He established the University of Naples.
Oh,
he was literally the quote papal theologian, which isn't surprising at all. I don't know that I had really knew that. And of course, his mentor was St. Albert the Great. That's something I wanted to look up, is how many the greats were there. And I didn't end up doing that. We're going to run into St. Gregory the Great here in a couple days, though.
You got to wonder with the saints, too. I get this feeling sometimes, like, St. Albert the Great, obviously they don't have pride in heaven. They don't have the sin of pride or something. But you still have to wonder, it's like, St. Albert the Great and then St. David the water drinker. It's like, do they look at each other up there sometimes and kind of like, roll their eyes a little bit, like, oh yeah, hey, water drinker. I guess they're both in heaven, so it's all good for both of them anyway.
Well, the thing is, though, in heaven, being called the water drinker might be a better appellation than being called.
It might. Yep. True.
Now, what I thought was interesting too, and I did not know this. I knew that he had died on his way to the one of the councils of Lyon.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know how he died? He was riding along on, I don't know, his donkey or his horse, and literally hit his head on a low branch.
Oh.
Did you know that? That's terrible. I had no idea. And he actually lingered for a day or two, I think, before he died. But I had no idea that was what happened to him.
Wow.
That it wasn't illness, that he hit his head. He probably had a concussion of some kind, is my guess. But yeah, it's just that surprised me. I had no idea. It's so much fun to look into the saints, because you just never know what you're going to find.
Right.
So then, all right. So moving forward, you could talk about St. Thomas Aquinas all day, but moving forward, we have St. John of God, who, I knew a little bit about St. John of God. I had not ever read a lot about him. He's fascinating. St. John of God was, he was in the 16th century, from like 1495 to 1550. He died when he was 55 years old, 60 years old. He was a Portuguese soldier, but here's the interesting thing about him. He was the founder of the Hospitaller Order, which, as you would guess, that makes him the patron saint of hospitals and literally of sick people too. Now, here's the interesting thing, though, which is sad and sort of tragic. When he was only 8 years old, he was kidnapped, just literally kidnapped and taken away from his family, his mother and father. I think he was an only child, and never returned and never saw his parents again. And his parents never saw him. His mother died of a broken heart, and his father then joined the Franciscans. And somehow or another, he ended up, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 years old in Toledo, Spain, where he was sort of taken under the wing of a farmer and became a shepherd. And then because the farmer he thought so much of him, he wanted him to marry his daughter, and he did not want to marry the girl, so he ran away and joined the Portuguese army and literally traveled the world for 20 years before coming back to Spain, and ended up in Granada. Eventually ended up in Granada. He had at one point, he actually went back to Portugal looking for his family, but of course he had found out they had died, and was a little bit wandering about a little bit and trying to figure out his place in the world. He worked as a book printer for a short time. But then when he was in Granada, he heard the sermons of a John of Avila, and then was so touched by the sermon that he literally, or almost literally, went mad with repentance and the sins of his lifetime and of his adulthood, and was put into an insane asylum of the Royal Hospital there, and eventually was released after having, he got back with John of Avila, who gave him some good advice and told him, stop, castigating yourself and do some good in the world. And he did. He got out, and he helped, the poor, the indigent, and the insane, and opened up many hospitals, and he started the Hospitaller Order. But he died before it was actually an approved order. But actually a fascinating guy, just in general, for the sick. And, now is a good time to be praying to St. John of God. But I didn't know very much about him. He's really rather fascinating. All right, so the next one on March 10th is one that you know about, the 40 Holy Martyrs of Sebaste.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. They're the ones who were some of the ones that inspire me the most are the soldiers. I guess just because I'm a guy who kind of likes tough soldier, war movie type stuff, and so I think I think that's a beautiful thing, as you say about St. John of God as well, that there are many infinite different ways of becoming a saint. I think that oftentimes you get into this mindset that you have to be a Saint Thomas Aquinas to make it to heaven or to become a saint. And obviously that's not true. I mean, that's one way, but you can also, do it literally just by staying the course and following, your values and obviously being willing to freeze to death on a lake, for God. And that was, of course, the 40 Holy Martyrs. Right. Well, and that's one of the beautiful things about when you study the saint. There is no one way. There's so many different paths. And then these were the 40 Holy Martyrs. And then the funny thing about them is I had no idea there was as much documentation on them as there was. There's a lot. Did you know we know every single name? I actually had seen that. I haven't looked into their names, but actually I think I noticed that when I read that their story a couple of years ago.
Right. Well, that never crossed my eyes before. If I had known that, I would have years ago started on this feast day doing a litany of each individual one and saying their name. Yeah, that would be
a good idea.
Wouldn't that be the best thing to do?
Yeah, true.
And do that with after your rosary, just
true.
To I don't know. Every single one of them was a hero for God. I mean, just amazing. And the basic story. They were, which you might not know, is that they were the 12th Roman Legion, called Fulminata, which means armed with lightning, I guess. And Sebaste, I had no idea where that was. It's near present-day Sivas, Turkey. It was as little as 50 years after their death, they were already they were in the Mass. They had their own day. Their feast day was celebrated by Bishop Basil of Caesarea. We have this written, his homily or his sermon on their feast day, only 50 or 60 years after they died. Their relics, after they were frozen on the lake, the story in a nutshell, the 40 soldiers of this legion were all Christian. And they actually went through more than you usually hear in the short, nutshell version of the story. They actually were pestered for a long time about being Christian. They were known to have been Christian, and they were bribed, and they were cajoled, and they were threatened, and then they were finally thrown in jail, and then they were tortured for 4 days, and none of them gave in until they were finally sentenced to be frozen to death by lying naked side by side on a frozen lake with a guard around them, so they couldn't obviously escape. And 39 of them actually went to the end. One soldier, and there were hot baths on the edges of the lake, so that anyone could leave at any moment and give it, because they were a well-known and successful legion of soldiers, and losing all 40 of them would hurt the Roman army. They did not want to lose these men, so they put the hot baths on the side of the shores, and they said, well, anytime you want to just all we're asking is just a little tiny sacrifice to the gods of the Romans. And of course, they weren't going to do that, except for one jumped up at some point and ran to the baths, and upon jumping into the bath, immediately died. And so then there are different versions of the story. That one version of the story is that in the middle of the night, when all the guard had fallen asleep, the water suddenly melted, or the ice melted, the water became more warm, and the 39 soldiers were in the warm water, and one soldier was awake and saw 39 crowns in heaven descending down. And that was what caused that one last soldier to convert. Now, that's one version of the story. There's another version that I read that that didn't necessarily happen, that he saw the 39, and there's also a flash of light that you hear tell about at some point, or I don't really know. But one way or another, what we do know is that one soldier from the guard actually ended up joining the 39 on the ice to make the number 40 complete. And we know his name. I wrote it down here somewhere. Begins with an A. Anyway, we do know his name, the soldier who joined in with a 39 to make the number 40 complete.
On your blog, it says Saint Aglaius.
There it is. Thank you. Yeah, my computer timed out. Right, that's it. He's the soldier that actually stepped in and became number 40 again. And then what happened was that one way or another, they ended up collecting all the bodies and those that were still leaving a little bit alive and burnt them all, and then did not want the relics to go back to the people, because they already knew at this time that you didn't want relics going back to the people. And they were already going to be heroes amongst the Christians. They knew that. But by definitely miraculously, they threw the ashes of the funeral pyre into a river nearby, but there were still hundreds of pieces of relics that were still found. And I don't even exactly know the story. I wish I knew the story to that one. And they were distributed through the churches nearby. So anyway, they're cultists. They became quite famous quite early on, almost immediately, as you'd guess they probably would, right?
Well, and I think part of the story that I find really interesting and really obviously sad is the one who gave in and then died. I mean, I hope to goodness that there was some mercy for his soul, but I think that we can really take something from that I think, when we are offered that choice between God and the world and God and the devil and these temptations, that I think that obviously it's very easy to give in, but I think even physically, even in this world, if you give in, it rarely lasts. If you choose the world over God, if you choose, the flesh over goodness, it doesn't actually gain you happiness even in this life. And I think that's something to really remember, that, I mean, he chose, he gave into that weakness, which we can all understand and imagine if you're laying on a freezing lake, but immediately, even in this world, it didn't last, and nothing in this world lasts.
No, right. Exactly. Yeah. Here's another interesting thing too, though, that and this, I loved this part of the story that I had not heard before. One of the mothers of one of the soldiers was at the edge of the lake, yelling encouragement to her son. Don't give up, says this mother. Keep going. You're almost there. But this is a mother who understood. This is a mother who got it. Instead of wanting him to give up and run into the bath, instead of wanting to keep him to herself, she knew that, staying the course was the best thing for her son. But yeah, I never knew that there was a mom there. There was a mom there.
Wow.
There's a mom somewhere.
And I do want to mention too that these names, I think I really liked your idea too of praying to each one of these 40 martyrs, and you can find this on the blog. I will attach the blog to this podcast, I highly recommend anyone listening to go and read the blog. It has much more information than what we're talking about. We're probably going to go long, which is totally fine, but that's just covering the basic points of some of these saints. So please, if you're interested in this, go check it out. I'll attach that link to this episode. You can find it if you Google. I think what did you say, Mom? If you Google "Are We There Yet?" Blog, Colorado,
right?
Yeah, then you'll find it too. But it'll be attached to this episode anyway. Okay, right. So who's next?
Right, and just to interject, there's lots of links for homeschool moms if you want little projects and coloring pages. I saved them for years and years, so I just link them on there too. You know what? I need to backtrack because I missed March 9th. On March 9th, if you're going to do a novena to St. Patrick, begin that on March 9th. But then there's also St. Dominic Savio. How could I miss him? St. Dominic Savio, of course, in our minds, we connect him with
youth.
Well, right. Well, And what other saint, famous saint?
Oh, St. John Bosco.
Yeah, that's right. St. John Bosco. They're just kind of go together for me. They're bookends. The interesting thing about St. Dominic Savio, which I guess I didn't put the years together, during his, he only lived to be 14 years old, of course, but during his lifetime was when, in 1854, was the definition of the Immaculate Conception by the Church, that, it was actually defined officially by the Church in 1854. And this is before St. Bernadette of Lourdes by a little bit too. But he was so taken with the whole concept and notion of the Immaculate Conception that little St. Dominic Bosco started his own little club at the oratory called the Company of the Immaculate Conception, which, I don't know, that just warms my heart so much. As a student for St. John Bosco, he was so exemplary in so many ways that St. John Bosco just knew that this was a special kid. And from early on, kept literally, I keep saying literally, he kept notes about St. Dominic. He had a little notebook that he kept notes about St. Dominic, thinking, I'm going to want to remember this later. And he did. He ended up writing the biography, which helped, have him be canonized. He was canonized by Pope Pius XII in 1954, which was 100 years after the definition of the Immaculate Conception, which just seems kind of neat.
Right.
The interesting thing, too, just as an interjection, he was one of the last valid canonizations because this is Pope Pius XII. So he was in the company in the last valid canonizations of 34 saints by Pope Pius XII, that including in really great company with St. Maria Goretti, St. Catherine Labouré, St. Louis de Montfort, St. Gemma Galgani, St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. They were in that last group of canonized saints. And not that there aren't other saints that should, may have been, that haven't been officially canonized. They may be in heaven, but these are the ones that are officially canonized by the Church, and the last ones. He's another saint of little things. He was perfect obedience was what he was well known for, was his perfect obedience. But then that's St. Dominic Savio. If you want to do a novena to St. Joseph, and who doesn't want to do a novena to St. Joseph, you want to begin that on March 11th. So you might want to make a note on your calendar. On March 12th, we have St. Gregory the Great. And I was just listening to your podcast about music. And he, of course, is known for
the Gregorian chant.
The Gregorian chant, among other things. A lot of things he was known for. He was actually 34 years old. He was made the chief magistrate of Rome. He lived, of course, in the 6th century. Mainly the 6th century. And he was 34 years old at that time. He did not become a priest until the next year. And then, of course, moved up very quickly from there. He was highly educated, extremely intelligent man, and very, very pious and obviously holy. His is one of the saints that if you're looking it up by the date, you're going to have a hard time, because the Novus Ordo moved his feast day. And I think they also moved St. Thomas Aquinas. Somebody else is like that, because they didn't want it to be in Lent, which I find interesting, because I'm sure that St. Gregory the Great was perfectly happy to have his feast day in Lent.
I mean, honestly, too, I mean, the Novus Ordo doesn't really do anything in Lent, so why do they care? Right. I mean, they don't have any rules or anything, so what's the issue? What
exactly was the point in that? I have no idea. But anyway, If you're looking around, and I was finding that as I'm looking around for more information on St. Gregory the Great, they've all got the dates wrong. But anyway, one of the interesting things about him, and I actually went on a search for this, his election to the papacy, and this should not surprise you, was unanimous. And I wonder how many times in history that happened at papal elections, how many times it was unanimous. I tried to find that and couldn't find it. But it was unanimous, which you would certainly hope it would be. He is the patron saint of singers and music and students and teachers, as we probably would all guess. And this is the interesting one. So in about 600, the year 600, which was about 4 years before he died, actually, the bubonic plague showed up for the first time. It was at that time called the Justinian plague, or maybe that's just separating it from other bubonic plague outbreaks. And then it killed. Nobody really knows how many were killed. They believe that 1/5 of the population of Rome was killed, died in the bubonic plague, and apparently the symptoms of it were sneezing and yawning. Okay, so he made a decree telling everybody that whenever anybody sneezed, they should bless the sneezes. So say, "God bless you," to pray for the health of the person who just sneezed. So we're talking about, forget the stupid mask, put the blessing of God over that mouth. And even more, and this one would just kill people today. If you yawned, you literally made the sign of the cross over the person's mouth with your hand. So, yeah. But we don't do that anymore. Obviously, we don't make the sign of the cross over a yawn, but we do still say, "God bless you." At least I certainly do when somebody sneezes. And that goes back to St. Gregory the Great, which I had no idea. I thought that was so fascinating.
That is interesting.
Who knew?
I have to comment a little bit on yawns. That's one of a little bit of my pet peeves, and I fall subject to it too. But when people yawn constantly during prayer, to me, I guess I tried, and again, I do it too. If you're really tired, I know it's very hard, but to me, I think of praying, especially when you're praying out loud and you're praying with other people, you're talking with God, right? You're talking with Our Lady, you're talking with whoever you're praying to and trying to get help or aid or whatever. And I think that the way I look at it, that is the highest thing that you can do, right? You're talking with the King of heaven and earth. So I kind of think about if you're yawning, well, I mean, would you yawn if you had an interview with the Queen of England, or with even with President Biden? I don't think so. Because it's kind of this rude action, I think. That's just my opinion. So I think I really try, this is just personally, to really not yawn when I'm praying, because I just think to me, it's a sign of almost disrespect in saying to God, who you're trying to talk to, that I've got better things to do, mainly sleeping. So anyway, sorry, off topic, but that just struck me because that really does stick with me sometimes. I think something we can think about.
Well, right. Well, what is Lent all about? Lent is about subjugating your lower nature. You should try to not do that. Sometimes you can't help it. It's all you can do, just to press your lips together. But you should try not to. That's like, I used to teach a class of first, second, third graders many years ago. And one of the main rules of the teacher, who was my mentor, who taught me to teach, was that you're not allowed to scratch. No scratching, no wiggling. You had to be still and you couldn't scratch. Well, the minute I told those children not to scratch, all they could do was scratch, And it's the same thing with yawning. As soon as you tell somebody don't yawn, everybody's going to want to yawn, But that is also part of, like, when you become a sister, you are taught basic decorum, and it is decorum. And back in the day, everybody was taught this, that you didn't yawn, and you tried to avoid sneezing at all whenever you could, and you didn't scratch in public at all, but especially in polite society or in church being number one. But we don't really teach that kind of thing today. I mean, it's we're so informal. We don't teach that sort of bodily discipline, which I think you're right. I think we should. I think it the less you teach it, the more you become barbarians, right? I mean, this was at the height of the Catholic faith. I think, I'm sure was the height of I don't want, maybe pomp is too much, but kind of your glorious, the beauty of how things were, how people acted, and how people, were especially how people treated religious, and how you acted when you were with religious. So I think it's, again, like, if you're talking with a bishop or a priest, you don't yawn because it's rude, right? I mean, you don't yawn unless you're with people you're really comfortable with. So why do we yawn when we're talking to God? I don't know, but it's just a little thing for me that it's something to think about. And now we're all going to be thinking about this.
And everyone's going to be yawning. So you're welcome, everyone, if you have trouble sleeping.
You see what we did? Right. But anyway, moving forward. So you've got March 14th, which is Laetare Sunday, also known as Rose Sunday, because of the color of the vestments, which are not, don't say pink, they're rose. And also because of the golden rose. You remember that tradition? That
I do. The king, is it the Holy Roman Emperor had to bring a rose to a certain church in Rome or something?
Yep, no, around the Pope sent they blessed,
yeah.
They blessed it in Rome. I can't remember the name of the stational church of the day, but they blessed it in Rome. This started right around 800 AD, so something like that, reign of Charlemagne. And they would bring a golden rose not only to the Holy Roman Emperor, but at first it was just him, but all of the good Catholic prelates of the world, the kings of the world, got a golden rose. Yeah. So don't know that that's happening anymore, but it's a wonderful thing to think about.
So it's kind of like now. It's like now you get coal in your stocking at Christmas if you've been bad. So these kings, they knew if they were out of favor if they didn't get a golden rose.
They didn't get the rose. Yeah, exactly. So of course, on the interesting thing about Laetare Sunday is that the organ and flowers are allowed, and weddings are actually permitted on Laetare Sunday. But I don't think most people take advantage of that, because then you're going right straight back into Lent, which, I think I'd avoid that myself personally. Laetare Sunday, now this is an interesting one. It was at one time also called Mothering Sunday, because, in former times when people had servants were all allowed to go home on this Sunday to see their mothers, which I love that. We could still do that. You've got a couple weeks to get here, Kevin.
No worries.
But so that was, and Laetare Sunday is obviously I think we all know, the midpoint of Lent. It means we're halfway there. This is sort of the church's way of saying, hang in there, you can do it, you're halfway there. Then we have March 17th, which is St. Patrick. And we all know, I think, the general story of St. Patrick, that he was of a Roman. His father, I don't know if he was actually Roman or he was actually worked for the Romans. But he came from Britain, they believe, though that's a little bit murky. He was 5th century, of course. That's a long time ago to know all the details. But he was the Apostle of Ireland. He was stolen away by pirates and kept captive in Ireland as a shepherd for, I think it was 6 years. I didn't write that down. I think 6 years. And then he escaped through a dream that told him where exactly to go and how to escape. He went back to England. He eventually became a priest, and then got permission eventually to go back to Ireland, became the Apostle of Ireland. And we all know all of the legends about him getting rid of the snakes in Ireland. He's also, I found interesting, the patron saint of engineers and paralegals, which how that happened, I always wonder. There's got to be a story, but I couldn't find why. Let's see, the interesting thing that I found about him. Oh, when he came back, he landed in Wicklow, Ireland. You've been to Wicklow, haven't you? Or was that Dominic that went to Wicklow?
I think we did pass through Wicklow, yeah. I've been to St. Kevin's church.
Right.
Oh no, that's St. Kevin's though. That's not.
Yeah,
no, that was in Wicklow though. I think.
That is Wicklow. Yeah. St. Kevin's.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, yeah, everywhere you go there's a good story. Crowpatrick is also called the Reek, R-E-E-K, which I think means the stack, just because it's a 2,500 foot mountain in Mayo. It's climbed on, and not just on St. Patrick's Day, it's mainly climbed on Reek Sunday, which is the last Sunday in July, which I did not know. It's a great pilgrimage day there. And back in the day, you fasted and prayed, and if you understand how these pilgrimages work, you do that today. You fast and pray before making the trek up the 2,500 foot mountain. Some people do it barefoot. So used to in the medieval days, they would carry stones to the top, and then you would find all these piles of stones at the top that people would build at the top of Crowpatrick because of the stones that they carried up. There's been a chapel at the summit since the 5th century, since St. Patrick's time. And now here's an interesting thing. In the 1980s, and I vaguely remember when this was found actually, a seam of gold was found in Crowpatrick. And it was estimated to be able to be mined to retrieve 300,000 troy ounces of gold if it were allowed to be mined. But the people of Ireland said, don't you dare. and they didn't. And they have left it. So underneath Crowpatrick, if you do the pilgrimage, you're walking on top of gold, which is of absolutely no importance whatsoever. Now, here is a really fascinating one, too. St. Patrick's Purgatory. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It is supposed to be the world's toughest modern pilgrimage, that you can sign up for it. You can't just walk in on it. And it does actually include fasting, and you're not allowed. It's on an island. It's on Station Island, and there is an actual cave, or the I want to say portal, is the mouth of a cave that St. Patrick was taken to, or ended up at, and was fasting and praying, and God, our Lord, showed him what hell looked like. And so the mouth of that cave was called a portal to hell. Eventually, and it wasn't literally, but it was, he saw the vision of hell in the portal of this cave. And they built a monastery over it at some point in history. There was a monastery built over it. And I think at least the ruins are there. I was looking for pictures of it, but it was hard to find pictures. But you could go even today for a 3-day pilgrimage. And it's a 24-hour vigil before you even go to the mouth of this cave where it is in this old abbey. No electronics are allowed on the island. It's very, very strict that you can do this to this day, and do the St. Patrick's Purgatory pilgrimage, which I find absolutely fascinating because I've never even heard of it before. It's like, oh, might have to check into that someday. Here's another thing that we were just talking about with someone else. The official color of Ireland is actually disputed. You and I would assume it was green because it's the Emerald Isle. It's the color of shamrocks, etc. But in the 1700s, there's an order of St. Patrick that has a golden harp on a field of sky blue. So there is a school of thought that believes the actual real color of St. Patrick should be azure or sky blue. So, it could be blue, could be green. What it definitely is not is orange. It is definitely not orange.
Right.
That's the one thing we absolutely know. So that's
so on St. Patrick's Day, if people don't wear green, you pinch them. If they wear orange, you punch them.
There you go. I won't tell anybody you said that.
All right. Fair enough.
And then, of course, March 19th is our dear St. Joseph. St. Joseph might be best known for what he never said. He never spoke. He never spoke in the Bible. I mean, we obviously see him throughout the life of Jesus. Up until the finding in the temple, we see him, and especially in the story of the birth of Christ and the trip to Egypt. What I find interesting about there's so much you can say about St. Joseph, but not a whole lot that we know of his life. He's very, very beloved all over the world. He's especially loved in Italy. The Italians love St. Joseph. There was a time in Sicily when they had a really bad drought, back in the Middle Ages at some point, and they prayed and did novenas to St. Joseph to help them through the drought. And it was fava beans, which I'm not even exactly sure what a fava bean is. I think I can picture it. But they survived the drought, and the people of Sicily ate fava beans until things turned around. He's got them through the drought. And being the loyal and grateful children that they are, and being Italians who love to eat and celebrate, they make a big deal out of St. Joseph's Day on March 19th. And they build a big altar of St. Joseph, not in the church, but usually in a parish hall. Sometimes at people's individuals' homes, they would do them too. They're in 3 tiers. The top tier, you have St. Joseph set up. And the second and third tier would be decorated beautifully and interspersed with flowers and greeneries and all kinds of meatless food. So in Italy, of course, that's going to mean pasta. and fava beans are going to be have to be in it too. Seafood and breadcrumbs, which are supposed to symbolize sawdust. And then this altar is blessed by the priest. Then you have everybody come to the party, and I think this is usually, you have mass first, and then everybody goes over, and then they eat from the big altar of St. Joseph. And then when everything's done, and there's all kinds of stuff on here, symbols and bread shaped like doves and fish and shaped people. I mean, they would try to outdo each other on symbols of St. Joseph baked as bread and things like that. And then they would smash the whole altar down and have a reenactment of the Holy Family's journey to Bethlehem. And it was just a big deal in Italy. And I think it is to this day in some parishes. But I think that'd be fun to do. If we do, if anything that involves eating. Of course, this is Lent, so that'd have to be your main meal.
True. I think it's interesting with St. Joseph that I think he has really become the saint of our times in many ways. And I think from what I've seen, you kind of have two saints who've really taken over the hearts of the traditional Catholics. And I think that's St. Joseph and St. Philomena. And I think it's really interesting because I think they're two very different saints, in my opinion, at least. That you have St. Joseph, as you say, you don't ever hear from him. He's very humble. He's a quiet worker, the one who quietly took care of his family. And then you have St. Philomena, who I think is much more of this strong, not impetuous, because that's a bad thing, but very
sociable, talkative.
Yeah, but also, and really, I always picture her as being this very strong, fiery, person. Maybe that's wrong, but she is also one who, like you say, she's known to actually communicate with people with these little miracles. And I think that's really interesting that we have chosen to pick these two saints that are extremely different from each other as our kind of the saints of our times. True. Well, St. Joseph makes even more sense he's always been known, or at least for a long time, as the saint of the end times. I think that there were saints have told us that he would be the saint of the end times. And two, he's the patron of the universal church. He's the patron of fathers, and he's the patron of death, of dying. So, there's a lot of reasons I think that we would be naturally drawn to him in our day. And he's such a doer. And that's the beauty of St. Joseph. He's quiet, but he's a doer. He's just going behind the scenes, getting things done. And be careful what you ask St. Joseph, because he will just do it or just not do it. but when he does it, he usually does it big. We've done novenas to him for every house we've ever bought. And he comes through. Usually, boom, he and St. Philomena are two go-tos for everything that, for everything. And St. Philomena, look out what you ask for, because and the trick about St. Philomena too, you got to do deals with St. Philomena, but you would never do a deal with St. Joseph. You just wouldn't. He's very straightforward, just St. Joseph. But right. How can you not love him? It's like the Blessed Mother. But I always forget which saint it was that said it. I can see his picture in my mind. I can't think of his name. That said, how can we love the Blessed Mother more than Jesus did? It's the same way with Saint Joseph. How could you love him more than Jesus did? And he must have loved him so much. For sure.
But, and that's Saint Joseph. And then of course the next really big one is Saint Benedict. He's the 5th century. He's the father of Western monasticism and obviously the founder of the Benedictine order. And he made the rule of St. Benedict, which is the model of all other religious rules, or pretty much all other religious rules. I don't know what to say about him. There's some, I think we pretty much know the basics about him. He's the patron saint of beekeepers, which is really nice because I have bees in my backyard, thanks to our good friends that put their beehives in our backyard. It's a tradition in France still to attach a St. Benedict medal to the hives. And I have never gotten close enough to our hives to see if they put a St. Benedict medal on there. I'm going to have to ask them. Do you guys need a St. Benedict medal? And the medal of Saint Benedict, I think, is the most powerful medal that you get, or one of the most powerful medals, especially particularly against demons and the protection against demons. I would think that no exorcist would be without a Saint Benedict medal. You should have one in your house if you don't have one. And Saint Benedict medals have to be blessed by a Benedictine. The Novus Ordo said that they changed that back in 1968 so that anybody can bless a St. Benedict medal. Well, that's not true. A Benedictine needs to bless a St. Benedict medal. The interesting thing about that is, the St. Benedict medal is, I don't know about you, but you immediately recognize it, right?
Right.
There's a lot on a St. Benedict medal. And I was very interested to find out, all right, what is all this? So I looked it up. All right, so you've got in the middle of it, you've got St. Benedict, of course, the little tiny picture of St. Benedict. He has the rule, or an indication, it's like a book, of the rule in his left hand and a cross in his right hand. And then it says CSPB, which means Cruxis Patris Benedicti, which I know I'm pronouncing that badly, which means the cross of our Holy Father. There's a lot of acronyms on it. Then you've got a cup. That you remember the shattered cup with the poison, that the cup shattered by a miracle of Saint Benedict. On the right of Saint Benedict, on his left, there's a raven. Remember the raven feeding him the bread, or he would have starved. That's how his fast was perfect, in that God provided his food through the raven. Then the Latin words that arch around the sort of the margin of the medal, say, may we be strengthened by his presence at the hour of our death, in Latin. Then below Saint Benedict, it says on, usually the medal that you see are the ones that were made and distributed after the Jubilee. They're called Jubilee medals, after the 1400th anniversary of Saint Benedict. And I think that was 1880. So there on the bottom of that, it says SM Casino, and then the year, which is 1880. And that's what you'll see on most medals. Then on the back, there's a cross. And on the arms of the cross, it says, Crux sacra sit mihi lux, nunquam Draco sit mihi dux, which my Latin scholar sons would be horrified at the way I just said that, I'm sure. But what that means is, may the Holy Cross be my light. May the dragon never be my guide. It rhymes better in Latin than it does in English, which I never knew what that meant before. Above the cross, it says Pax, of course, which means peace. And around the margin of that, there are all these letters. It's VRS, NSMV, SMQLIVB, which are the initials that stand for, be gone, Satan, never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil. Drink the poison yourself. That's what it says in Latin, which is like, how cool is that? Right. That's what that says. Those are the initials for those words in Latin, which, gives you some idea. That plus the strong Benedictine prayer over it, why the devil hates those Saint Benedict medals. But Saint Benedict is another one that we could go on and on about. But all right, so then the 24th is Saint Gabriel the Archangel. And the 24th and the 25th kind of go hand in hand a little bit, because the 25th, of course, did I even write it down here? The 24th and the 25th is the Annunciation. We know that Saint Gabriel was one of 3 archangels that are named in the Bible. Then the word Gabriel means strength of God. The first time, there are actually 3 times that we see Saint Gabriel in the Bible. And the one that we know about is at the Annunciation to the Blessed Mother, when the Son of God was conceived. But the first time we ever saw him was in helping St. Daniel, Daniel in the lion's den. And then the second time is when he told Zachary that St. Elizabeth would be the mother of St. John the Baptist. So we actually see him 3 times in the Bible. We have the description of what St. Gabriel looked like by Venerable Mary of Agreda, as described to her by the Blessed Mother.
Wow.
And I'll go ahead and read that because I find it absolutely fascinating. It's the appearance of the great prince and legate, and this is a quote from Venerable Mary of Agreda, was that of a most handsome youth of rarest beauty. His face emitted resplendent rays of light. His bearing was grave and majestic, his advance measured, his motions composed, his words weighty and powerful. His whole presence displayed a pleasing, kindly gravity, and more of godlike, small g, qualities than all of the other angels until then seen in visible form by the heavenly mistress. He wore a diadem of exquisite splendor, and his vestments glowed in various colors, full of refulgent beauty. Encased on his breast he bore a most beautiful cross, disclosing the mystery of the incarnation, which he had yet to announce. How cool is that?
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even like she's so much picturing him visually, it's picturing what he was like.
Right.
But, yeah, kind of neat to read.
Right.
But, so he is the patron saint of, you'll like this one, broadcasters.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The clergy, anybody who works in communication, diplomats and messengers, these all make sense. He's the patron saint of Portugal, and postal workers, which kind of makes sense with communication and messengers. He's the patron saint of Seattle. Yeah, Seattle, Washington. Yeah. Telegraphs and telephones. He's actually the patron saint of television, and stamp collectors, which I find interesting. But yeah, I guess that goes with communication.
I mean, do stamp collectors really need a guardian angel or a saint? I mean, come on.
Sure they do. Everybody needs a patron saint. That's what I'm all about. And then of course, that gets into discussion of the Angelus, and the Angelus I find I love the Angelus, actually. I love the Angelus. So one of the reasons we have bell towers is so that we can pray the Angelus. I remember being in Oberammergau, we went to when you got married, and we were underneath the bell tower of Saints Peter and Paul Church in Oberammergau, and it still does the Angelus ringing, and it's very loud.
Yeah.
And it'll wake you up in the morning. But that's a wonderful thing. I mean, that's how people literally set their time. People didn't have watches back in the medieval days, and so that's how they knew, oh, lunchtime, we better go now. But yeah, a lot of interesting things about the Angelus. So there is a particular way to ring a bell for the Angelus, which is specific, and the way it has been written to do. It's a triple stroke repeated 3 times. So it's ding, 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 and then pause, and then another triple, and then a pause, and then another triple, like that. And that is the right way to do it, which I found interesting too. And next time I go to church and I'm there for the Angelus, I'm going to pay better attention. It's like, oh, is that what you guys are doing?
I think so. I think that's how they do it in Omaha too. Yeah,
they probably do, because it's enough time to get the Angelus prayed. So
right.
They must sit out about like that too. But I never paid attention to how they grouped it. I'm usually too busy praying the Angelus. So, at the olden days too, they would, the 6 p.m. bell ringing, the very last bell would just keep ringing longer. It would be a longer peal of the bells, because that meant curfew, if that was pertinent.
Interesting.
Interesting. You know what else too I saw? That it used to be, and I wonder if it still is, and anybody out there in Ireland who knows, that the Angelus used to be broadcast on Irish radio and TV. The last note that I could find of it was about 2015, that at least a station or two still did that in Ireland, that rang broadcast the Angelus bell over the airwaves, which I thought was actually super cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, the last vestiges of Catholicism, last vestiges. Then we have March 26th, which is the Feast of the Sorrowful Mother. Anybody who wants a chaplet of the Sorrowful Mother, they are available at the MIQ gift shop online. This is Mount St. Michael's gift shop, has them in their catalog, and I used to have one. I don't know where it is, but the chaplet of the Sorrowful Mother is meditating on the 7 sorrows of the Blessed Mother, and it's a beautiful little chaplet, and one that if you have never done, you don't need a chaplet to pray this. You could do it, on your fingers for that matter. But it's a wonderful one to look up. It's on my blog too. Exactly how to pray the chaplet of the Sorrowful Mother. That's on the 26th. And then it's always so appropriate that the church is the way the liturgical year is set up is just so perfect. I mean, it's the perfect time to have the Feast of the Sorrowful Mother. And at this point, in the year, it's the perfect time to be meditating upon that. March 28th is, and we also have 2 family birthdays in about this time. March 28th is a certain other son's birthday, and yours is on the Assumption. Right. I mean, the Annunciation, excuse me.
Annunciation, yeah.
The Annunciation, right. We always thought that was like the coolest thing that could ever happen to you is to have a child born on the Feast of the Blessed Mother. So you got a good one.
I did.
You did.
Thank
you. And then I never forget your birthday.
Also good.
Then March 28th, this year's Palm Sunday. So, right. And then palms are about palms. If you're going to fold your palms into a cross, you have to do it right away because once they dry out, and depending on where you live, that can be pretty fast. You can't bend them anymore. We put them behind our crucifixes and behind our pictures. And somebody said that you should have a piece of a palm in your sick call set, which makes good sense, I guess. I also read that in some places they will break a piece of palm off of their palm, behind their crucifix, and burn it when there is a storm, a dangerous storm, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know that either. It's called Fig Sunday. Do you know why Palm Sunday is called Fig Sunday?
No.
I didn't either. And I thought, what? Well, because right after our Lord's triumphal entry into Jerusalem was when our Lord cursed the fig tree. Remember the fig tree that didn't bear fruit?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It was right after the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and a reference or a reminder or a foretelling of what would happen to Israel when it, in turn, rejected the Messiah. So eating figs on Palm Sunday in some places is a tradition. So you could stock up on some fig Newtons or make some fig tarts or something like that. But so that's March 28th. And then we're followed quickly by Holy Week. And I don't know if we probably have run out of time to talk about Holy Week and all that goes on. That's a whole other discussion.
We probably could actually. Let's do that. Let's do a different show for Holy Week when we get closer to Holy Week. I think that would be something we probably could for sure take an entire episode to talk about. That's a good idea.
Right.
Let's do that.
Yeah, there's way too much to talk about on that one. I could go for another hour. So
right. Well, let's do that. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I do have to say that if anyone wants to mail me palms, that would be beautiful because we actually don't have palms here for Palm Sunday. We have these little local, not flowers, kind of tree buds, which are nice. They look fine, but they are a pain because they get everywhere. They're totally a mess. And so, as you know, as a blessed sacramental, you can't throw it away. So you have to kind of keep them, and then it's really a pain. So the Germans, I understand that it's harder for them to get palms, I guess, apparently. I don't know. I'm not sure why they don't do it, but I really much prefer the palms that we used in the U.S. and I think that most people probably use. So if anyone wants to send a gift and in appreciation for these podcasts, then please send me a box of palms, for goodness sake.
Oh, I can do that. I'll do that.
I was wondering. I think I'm just going to I'm going to look on eBay. Palms for Palm Sunday. It's probably pretty cheap, I bet.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be the same. I'll get you palms from here. Or you should ask your brother too. He could get you palms.
True.
But yeah, I had no idea. So they're. I'm going to have to look up a picture because now I'm really curious. I had no idea. So they're not something you can put behind a crucifix? Are they more flower?
You can. I'll send you a picture. It's hard to describe. They're kind of like they're little fuzzy. They're not flowers. They're like little fuzzy flower buds almost.
Oh.
It's interesting. It's much more penitential than palms in my opinion.
Yeah. That's interesting, though, because I don't picture that being what you would throw before the hooves of the donkey. something
no,
like that.
and they don't say that it is. It's not even a replacement. It's more of a, they don't get palms or easily get palms. So they just don't even, they do another plant, I think.
Oh, I see. Well, we'll have to make sure you get some palms.
Okay. I guess that the plant is called a Ketchenweide.
Oh, okay.
What? Ketchen. That's a hard word. Ketchenweide. Ina just showed me. She was listening outside the door, I think. Thank you, Ina. Really Ketchenweide. Yeah, it's like a little kitten. It's named after a kitten. Oh. Interesting. Because it's kind of like fuzzy. Anyway, everyone listening is like, okay, guys, we've heard enough. We've heard enough of your German flowers. Ketchenweide.
Wait, back up a second. It sounds like you're talking about pussy willows.
That could be.
I'm gonna have.
I have no idea what that. I've never heard that in English, but it would make sense. Yeah.
They've never grown in Colorado or anywhere.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, that's probably what it is. These little fuzzy little.
Yeah, they were kind of soft.
Buds. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they get everywhere, and they're a total pain.
Oh, that's really. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So interesting. Well, yeah. See, you learn something new every day. Traditions the world over. It doesn't make them, better or worse. They're just different.
This one's worse. And for any of my German listeners out there, I'm sorry, but it's worse. It is definitely worse. Many German traditions I absolutely love. But that's actually a recommendation that I know you would recommend too, is the Von Trapp book. What's it called?
It's around the year with the
Von Trapps. Yeah, it's really, really great. And a lot of traditions that are a mix of Austrian and kind of Bavarian Austrian have a lot of the same traditions. And so Austrian and American traditions. And it's a very, very cool book that has a lot of stuff that I think we've taken from. A lot of our family traditions come from there. And Ian and I, we kind of find new stuff every year. It's a beautiful book, and you can find it newly published. I don't know who publishes it, but you can find it online.
I've got a link on my blog too.
Perfect. Yeah, Around the Year with the Von Trapp Family is the name of it, and it's highly, highly recommendable. It's another good resource. I mean, again, your blog is really great too, with these ideas and tips for people to how to spend these feast days and how to cook for these feast days and how to sing for these feast days. And I think that the Von Trapp, she kind of just was preceding you in these ideas.
Oh, well, that's where we got most of our ideas from.
Right.
We found a copy of this book before it had been reprinted when you were a baby.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then we just incorporated it. But it's wonderful. Yeah. Great stuff. And ideas for cooking. And great stuff.
Really cool. Yeah. And it's nice for me too, because I mean, I live 45 minutes away from Salzburg and from the area, where the Von Trapps were here in the Alps. So it's a lot of very customs that are really relevant to our area too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, even more so. Who would ever have guessed?
I know, right? Who would have guessed? All right. Well, Mom, I think we better end it there. I think people are probably tired of hearing us talk about different Palm Sunday flowers or whatever. But I really enjoyed having you on. Thank you again, and thank you for all the work you put into the blog and to prepping for the show. I think the main message again is we want to get across is how important it is to know and love the saints and to put them as your heroes. I mean, if anyone listening, I doubt anyone listening does, but if you do have your heroes as anyone of this world, stop it right now. Don't put it all away and go and read the lives of the saints, because these are truly men and women they're not just godly, they're remarkable people. They are people that you really will be blown away by their lives. And it's really, really fascinating. I mean, I didn't even talk about St. Benedict, and I just read a book about St. Benedict. I mean, really fascinating. I think poignant to our times as well. And I think I have that in another podcast. If you want to hear that story, you can go listen to the one that I did with my dad called, what's that one called? I don't even remember. Let me look real quick. That one was called of eternal life, obedience, and the pursuit of suffering. And that's got kind of that story of how it's really fitting that his times really kind of fit in with ours as well. But anyway, thanks again, Mom, for being on, for talking March. I would love to have you on again at the end of the month to talk about Holy Week and kind of maybe our traditions, some traditions you might recommend, and also just kind of things we might need to know.
Right. I'll see what I can do.
Perfect. Okay. Until then, thank you very much, and God bless.
All right. God bless.
You've been listening to the Catholic Family Podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends and family. You can support the production on Patreon and PayPal, and you can reach Kevin at kevin89davis@gmail.com. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam, all for the greater glory of God.